Scotland with myself, Grant Stott. Now, Welsh alternative rockers, the Manic Street Preachers, have been on the scene for more than 30 years and are showing no signs of stopping. The 13th of April sees them release their 13th album, Resistance is Futile. They've also announced a massive UK tour, which will bring them up to Glasgow's Hydro on the 25th of April. Our very own Nicola Meighan caught up with the band's James Dean Bradfield ahead of the album's launch, and Nicola began by pointing out the band will be releasing their 13th album on Friday, the 13th of April, asking if that was a wry bit of scheduling on their part or a coincidence.
It's also my dad's birthday.
Oh, is it? Oh,
yeah,
wow.
It is, yeah. Triple whammy. There's nothing designed there, and it's just strange to hear the sentence. A band releasing their 13th record. I think the average lifespan of a band now is 1.5 albums. I think.
My goodness me, if they're lucky.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, so no, we wouldn't have like pounced on that as something serendipitous or even unlucky. It just happened.
It's lucky for the fans, I would
Hopefully.
say, especially after obviously Nicky made some comments last year that maybe you'd made your last album. So I was delighted to see something new was coming out. Was there anything in particular that galvanised the new record? Any songs from it?
Well, yeah, number one, I think Nicky White was being a bit mischievous when he said that. I remember standing next to him going, what the hell are you on about? But I think I always felt that we were on the right track. And it was quite a kind of an experience making the record because we started it over 2 years ago, and then we had the news that we had to mothball our studio in Cardiff because, that typical kind of tale of progress, our studio was getting flattened for flats kind of thing. So we had to mothball the studio and find another place to build another studio, which took over a year. So the album would have been much sooner if it hadn't been for that.
That must have been such an upheaval, though. I mean, you'd been in the previous studio since, was it 2001 or thereabouts? You'd been there a long time.
We'd been working there since 2001 and it'd been ours since 2006.
My goodness.
So it was an upheaval. It was saying goodbye to our clubhouse. And we're the kind of band that needs a clubhouse. We just go and sometimes don't even play a note of music. Sometimes we just go there to watch sport with each other and just moan about stuff. So that was an upheaval for us. But for me, once we started the record in the new studio, it just felt right to me. But I think once we got, there were two songs towards the end of the record that came really quickly. The one was International Blue, the first single. And then the other song was a song called Hold Me Like a Heaven.
Oh, I love that.
Well, those two songs it made everything else sit perfectly. That's the thing with album tracks. They need other tracks around them to justify their position. That's the strange thing about the art form of the album. Some songs need to be framed by bigger songs to make sense of themselves. So for Nick and Sean, they definitely felt as if the album was coming into shape when we did International Blue and Hold Me Like a Heaven. But for me, I was in this deluded, kind of self-confident bubble from track one.
Well, I'm delighted. I'm delighted for that. Absolutely. Forward-thinking, forward-looking. It's interesting, isn't it, as you say, that you did have this new environment and perhaps that did inform the outlook of the album in terms of looking forward and maybe not being in the comfort zone that you'd been in for so many years prior.
Do you know what? I think you may be right because Nick. I live in Cardiff. Nick lives in Newport. Obviously, this new studio is on the rural fringes of Newport now, and he's like, since we moved away from your city, the music's got better.
Nothing personal.
No. So they have this intercity rivalry between me and Nick now, which is good humoured. But I do think that, in a serendipitous kind of way, it was kind of good that we got chucked out of our old studio, Faster Studios, because I don't think we really needed to be in the middle of a city anymore. And now we're in the middle of the countryside. And, when we go to the studio, nobody's going, I'm going to pop out and, buy some stationery or,
No escape.
I'm going to pop buy a birthday card or buy a Twix. Everybody is just there. And actually, it's just great. We've got a clubhouse back, but it's like, it's the studio that will see us out to the end of our days.
And that will hopefully be a lot longer than Nicky Wire would have had us believe at the Q Awards, as you say, somewhat mischievously, possibly last year. Of course, it was barely, I think, 2 months or thereabouts after he said it that, because International Blue we first heard at the end of last year, is that right? I feel like I've heard it a little while ago now. And
it was.
I love, as a statement of intent for a new album, as always, so fired up, joyous. And I have to say, James, I love that so many decades since he registered that colour, Yves Klein, since, it was registered as a concept and as a colour. International blue, Yves Klein, still making waves all across culture, and that kind of informed the song to some extent, didn't it?
It did. I mean, the actual experience that formed the lyric was 5 years ago. I think Nick was away on a wedding anniversary with his wife, and it was the first trip they had made without the kids. So they went.
Absolutely fundamental moment, that.
It's something you don't forget, isn't it? And I went away, and of course, if somebody like Nick is going to go to a place like Nice, there is no way he's not going to go and see the Yves Klein collection. No. And he went there, and he just had one of those moments where, he was looking out onto the sea, and one of Yves Klein's paintings was just beautifully framed by a wall and the sea that Nice faces. And he was just like, no, what people understand is installation art. It has nothing on this moment where you can actually, his colour is framed by the sea. And I think he'd written it as a poem for himself. And I was nagging him for more lyrics at the end of the album. And he said, well, this is kind of for me. And I was like, no, thank you, give it to you.
I'll have that.
And what I loved about it is that it was such an uncynical sense of freedom about the lyric. I just loved the fact that Nick is still, there's a misconception about us. Sometimes people frame us with the Holy Bible era, or they frame us with this, this angst-ridden punk early version of ourselves. And sometimes, Nick especially has just written about things which just fill in with joy. Whether it be working class culture and Design for Life, whether it be Let Robeson Sing about Paul Robeson, or whether it be International Blue about Yves Klein. And I think, that's the thing with us. His best lyrics, and in the past, Richey's best lyrics, always inform the best music. I always need, great lyrics in front of me to inspire music. And, the lyric made me feel so free and optimistic that it just produced music that felt free and naive and optimistic. And I was glad that natural thing was still in us, where we could produce a track that almost sounded like Generation Terrorist Manic Street Preachers from 1992.
Exactly.
But beside the fact that I'm 49 now. And there was no construct, there was no element of trying to design such a thing. It just happened naturally. And I was glad that kind of like that happy accident is still in us.
Absolutely. And as you say, that it came really quite late on in the album and these songs. And it is that work of magic, isn't it? That sometimes you don't know what the part is that's going to make it all fall into place. And then suddenly, as you say, not necessarily effortlessly, but certainly in quite an innocent way, it appears and everything comes together. Dylan and Caitlin's another single that we've heard already. Joyous, a duet, of course. When did that come? Was that an earlier song?
It was. It's one of the oldest songs. That was one of the songs that we had started in Faster.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In 2000 and early 2016, perhaps. And then, obviously, we told we were closing the studio, and then, that's it. We didn't do any recording for a while until we found a new studio. So that song is one of the oldest ones, and it's a true duet because, there are two distinct narratives in the song lyrically, Caitlin and Dylan Thomas. And I think for Nick, it was just an interest. He was writing outside of himself for this record. I think, he really just had a sense of release to write outside of himself, whether it was about Vivian Mayer or Dylan and Caitlin or Yves Klein or, and I just love the fact that it was such an awkward lyric because, let's face it, Dylan and Caitlin had a co-abusive relationship.
Yeah, exactly.
Which is not an attractive phrase to say, but, you get a sense that, unfortunately, it was the undoing of them in the end, especially Dylan, but you get a sense that they enjoyed the heightened sense of drama, which was their domestic environment. And sometimes it's just good to write about things that perhaps other people are not writing about. I don't know.
Exactly. And explore, as you say, that relationship dynamic. And also there's the relationship dynamic between you singing with another vocalist. In this particular example, it's the anchoress. Do you enjoy that? Because it's like having another sparring partner, I guess. It brings something else to life in terms of the song, doesn't it?
Absolutely do. I mean, kind of like, I was born in 1969, and I remember the 70s were awash, and the early 80s awash with great duets, whether it be whether it be Islands in the Stream, Kenny Rogers and Dolly Parton, or whether it be Kiki Dee and Elton John. I love it when two vocalists interact, and I love having other people singing our stuff because, look, we've released, this is our 13th album, and I get bored with the sound of my own voice sometimes, and it just is natural. And I think that's the thing about rock and roll or wherever. another vocalist can just completely breathe life into a song. You know, it happened with Your Love Alone with Nina Pearson from Cardigans.
Of course.
You know, it was just such a... Sometimes people have gone to me, was it awkward letting go of the reins, letting another singer sing over one of your tracks? I'm like, no. It's amazing because I can just stand there and I just stood there and pretend I was in the Welsh Blondie for a while.
There you go. Listen, there's time yet.
Yeah, it was. So I love it. And Catherine from the Anchoress, you know, she grounded the song in some kind of sense, you know, sonically and emotionally as well. And, you know, we knew that her vocal would work on the song. So it's always great when it happens.
But I love that sense of, you know, it is that kind of balance between, as you say, really quite serious subject matter, but also this kind of fairly joyous execution of it. And I love that ambiguity that's throughout all of your work, but certainly feels particularly prevalent on this album. I mean, even the title, of course, Resistance is Futile. There's an ambiguity there. It could be a commentary on social change, political change, technological change, of course, but it's also a kind of reflection, I think, of how catchy and how immediate and how joyous the music is. Resistance is futile to the songs on it, so there's a play even in the title. Did you have the title early on?
You've got the job of our new PR. You just wrote the press release. That's the way it was. It was a phrase that had a flip side,
Great,
and that's everything we intended. So kind of like, thank you. I'll just keep stum.
You're very welcome. I'll just say that again a few times. I'll write it down, get it on a billboard. But of course, again, that resonates with Distant Colours, which is the new single out as we speak. And again, it's that thing, isn't it? Where I love the line, "I no longer know my left from my right," which could be a personal thing, it could be a relationship thing. Of course, to so many of us, it's a reflection on politics locally and globally.
It was a post-Trump election, post-referendum, post-general election song, because I think everything became starkly just obvious to me how intractable everything had become when I was sat around a table with some friends before the referendum. We all had the same, what you might call, voting inclinations. Yeah. But even we were tearing each other apart. Yeah. You know, kind of, and you have this thing of, broadly what you might call, and I'll never tell people what I vote for, but broadly what you might call on the Labour agenda side of things, you know, people were tearing each other apart. Well, you had kind of old avowed, kind of like, you know, kind of what you might call post-communist, kind of like, you know, socialists, kind of like post-communism socialists that really don't like Brussels for because they just see it as a sorting house for blue chip companies, you know, and cheap labour force and just going through tax loopholes. And you know, and of course, you know, Brussels don't believe in the nationalisation of industries, which a lot of what true blood socialists despise. And then you have, you know, people on the socialist side of things that just have a philosophical attachment to what the EU stands for, and the kind of the togetherness and the world without borders and the ability for people to go and, you know, to work and, you know, and take their skill anywhere they want to go, and the ability for a framework such as the Euro zone and kind of like a federalist institution like the Euro to actually stop wars happening. So you had these two opposing views that were traditionally on the same side but tearing each other apart. And I thought, wow, it's amazing. This is how far we've come. Not even people that have always supposedly been on the same side absolutely hate each other at the moment.
No, that's so true. The discussions are much more fractured now, aren't they? And there aren't really any easy answers to any of it. But the flip side, again, of Distant Colours is it almost rolls out that it could be a love song. It could be looking back on anything that you felt passionate about that you now question or you're not sure about.
It was. I mean, the song is disguised as a love song. It's disguised as a dysfunctional relationship and a plea for more understanding and more love, I suppose, kind of thing. And, you know, that was the construct of the song. I think there's an element of just realising that whether it be your likes, your tastes, your beliefs, your cultural inclinations, you know, your desires, your dreams, your ambitions, everything becomes a distant colour eventually, especially when you get to my age, I can tell you.
Oh my goodness me, you're a young man still. Just finally, we're delighted you're coming back to the Hydro. You're going to be in Glasgow April the 25th, celebrating the new album, of course, out in April as well. But I just wondered, you've obviously been up here relatively recently and you did have big anniversaries. We were speaking about the relatively large, in Manic's terms, gap between your last album and this one. But during that time, you toured and reissued the Holy Bible, and you toured and reissued Everything Must Go. And I wondered, just in terms of a band, and personally maybe as well, you know, if embracing and celebrating your past is something that then gives you a kind of a fresh leap forward when it comes to putting out something like this.
It does, because you can become cynical about your position in life, just as an individual, whether it be as a family man or as a musician or wherever. And sometimes when you tap into the past, it does enlighten you as to how good things can still be, you know, because we all become confused at some point, you know. But I think, you know, if you dwell in that space for too long, if you become a museum band, if you just celebrate your past, if you stay in that position for too long, which we nearly did, you know, we did that with like you said, we did the Holy Bible leading into the Everything Must Go reissue and anniversaries. If we had done that again, I think we might have been dead in the water, you know, because you've got to keep going forward. If you keep doing that kind of anniversary thing for too long, then, you know, it can just kill off your ability to actually look forward, I suppose. So kind of, it's not something we'll be scared to do, you know, again, you know, with another record. But, you know, I think we were all waiting to do a new record, but it was mitigated by losing our studio. So this album would have been out a year before if that hadn't happened. So I think we've always got plans. Once we stop having plans, you know, then we know the game is up. But I've still got lots of ambitions to drag Nick and Sean screaming into.
And, of course, to become the Welsh Blondie, of course. I'll be waiting for that side project, James Dean Bradfield.
I don't think anybody's up for the job, I must say.
Oh, you'd be surprised. Okay. Listen, we can't wait to see you in Glasgow. It's lovely to talk to you, James, and can't wait to hear the rest of the album. Thank you.
Thank you.
Terrific chat there. Nicola Meighan with James Dean Bradfield of the Manic Street Preachers. Resistance is Futile is out on the 13th of April, and you can see the band, as you heard there, at the Hydro on the 25th. Taken from that 13th studio album, here is the new single. This is Distant Colours.
Say what you want.